Hey there, folks. Chris McLean here, back with yet another episode of the show. And today in the studio, I've got Kelly Campbell. She's a conscious leadership coach. And after selling her 14-year-old cause marketing agency, Kelly began consulting and coaching other creative and technology leaders at the nexus of conscious leadership and agency growth. She's also co-founder of Consciousness Leaders, a first of its kind global collective of diverse and trusted experts helping organizations create lasting positive change. Super excited to get into all good things coaching and consciousness and transformation and leadership. Kelly, thanks for dropping by the show.
Chris, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited about this because I feel like you and I could probably nerd out on the intersection of this conversation for hours, but we'll try to keep it short and sweet.
We'll try to keep it powerful and short. But yeah, exactly. Consciousness, leadership, coaching, agencies, transformation, as you said, a really interesting nexus of things coming together, and maybe a side of who we are as business people that we forget about, right? We can get focused on the business and the systems and the stuff and the teams and all that important stuff and forget that we're human beings at the center of all of this stuff. And I assume that's where you're focusing on the person running the business and their consciousness, right? And how they're leading themselves as well as their agency.
That's right. Yeah. So I got into all of that after I sold my company in 2016. I had a great company. I had a great team, amazing clients. We were a cause marketing firm, so really serving nonprofits, foundations, CSR initiatives, educational organizations as well. And I loved all of it, except I would wake up and just be really, really feeling very unhappy. And so I had to, at some point, take a good hard look at that and kind of have a little come to Jesus moment with myself and, determine whether I wanted to keep doing this or not. So as luck would have it, I sort of went through an MBA-like program in 2016 and was putting a growth plan together for my agency. And the last month that I was supposed to graduate, I did graduate, but in that last month of that schooling, there were two different offers to sort of acquire the business. And I looked at both of those offers and neither one of them felt quite right. And so I was talking with a client who owned a technology firm and talked to him about, these two offers. And he made a third offer and he was the one who ultimately acquired the business. And so you would think, it was like, okay, this is great. Now I'm, off to Disney or something, right? I've done the thing. I've done the thing where every agency owner is like, oh my God, that's the holy grail. You can
hit the pinnacle,
it, right? Yeah, the pinnacle. And I experienced the complete and total opposite. So I felt like I had just sold. I don't have any children, but I felt like my business was like my 14-year-old daughter, and I felt like I had just sold her. I felt like I had attached so much of my ego and identity to this idea of being a CEO and a founder and leading a team and owning a company that I actually didn't know really who I was without that title. And then literally with no team behind me, I felt very alone, very isolated. I had no idea what I was going to do next. And so all of this ideology around selling your company and how that's just going to completely make all of your wishes come true and all of your issues melt away, I absolutely experienced the opposite. And so I took a little bit of time to do some self-development, personal development work. I feel like I was probably going through what some people might call like dark night of the soul or spiritual awakening. It doesn't matter to me what label or verbiage you use, but I kind of hit like an emotional rock bottom. And so picking myself up out of that and starting to understand who I was really important to me, and just kind of became the way that I crawled out of it. And I discovered consulting initially because I thought, well, I've got these skills, I've got experience, I've got expertise, and I'm really passionate about marketing and advertising and all of that. And so I started consulting. and the money was great. And, it was a good for a pretty good amount of time. But what I noticed was that people were still, these agency owners and leaders were still coming to me talking about the same thing. It was like, well, we are experiencing turnover with our clients, with our employees. We are relying on referrals. So we are in this like feast or famine thing. It was just like desperation, and we have to scale and we have to grow. And that means revenue and profit margin and employee headcount. And honestly, none of it was based in anything other than what other people had told them was the definition of success, right? So what I realized pretty quickly into the consulting realm, maybe a year and a half in, I was like, oh, what I actually need to be working on with these people is redefining what success means, and then helping them to figure out what self-limiting beliefs are housed in their bodies, like literally what's in their mind and what's in their body about what needs to happen, right, from a success standpoint. And then how they are the ones who are holding themselves back. So helping these agency leaders to go through some kind of transformation, initially on the self-development side, healing childhood trauma even. So really getting into some of that really deep work, and then translating that into a successful, sustainable agency. So it's been a wild ride, and I would not have chosen anything else, but I certainly couldn't have scripted it this way.
Yeah. I mean, you generally you wouldn't want to write that story, right? A lot of us go through. I went through something similar where I sort of hit the part of my career running the agency and had similar to like what I referred as like existential burnout, some sort of sort of existential crisis of agency was doing great, doing a few million a year, great clients, global presence, doing amazing work. We brought senior people into the team. We had a bigger senior leadership team where it had just been me and my best mate. There was conflict starting to grow, and rather than being the person in the agency that kind of did everything and was running the show, I was now isolated to a role. Right, you're the strategic director now, and that's your channel, that's your lane. So for me, it was like, well, who am I now in this agency? Right, and I'd sort of been on a personal growth for a few years at that, for 5-6 years at that point. And it was that are like, who am I now? The agency's growing, the agency's doing okay, but who am I and what do I want? And I always talk about this kind of divergent path. And maybe this is something that you found with clients where the agency's kind of going great over here. There's money, there's success, but then my value system is kind of going this way, right? And it creates this chasm, this divergent chasm of here's success and here's me going, oh, hang on, this doesn't feel right. Something's wrong here.
Yeah.
And do you often find that particularly creatives and agency owners have a difficult time understanding that, because they tend to be, and this is a massive generalization, but very driven type A, sort of hard charging, hustle and grind, and they maybe miss that kind of human spiritual component a bit?
Yeah. I think it's a good topic to bring up or something to discuss, because no one is really talking about that, right? What I have found is that by and large, there's a lot of imposter syndrome. And the reason why there's so much of that leaning in is, from my standpoint, maybe other people don't share this, but from my perspective, we become leaders because we're trying to actually heal ourselves. We're trying to prove something to ourselves and to the world that we are worthy, that we are valuable. And this is the way that we can do it. I'm speaking from firsthand experience, and I see this with my clients too. It's the way that because we co-create our reality, right? So we step into not step into these roles, we create these businesses. And what happens in a business like this, right? You're the CEO, you're the person in charge, you're making all the decisions. And so, people have to pay attention, whether it's your clients, your employees, what have you, and
Mm.
to kind of be needed and also be at the helm, right? Like there are people who are going to value you and find you worthy because of the role that you're in. And so I
Mm.
believe that we become leaders. We make ourselves, we create ourselves as leaders because we're trying to actually heal something. Um,
Mm.
I don't know that a lot of people talk about it like that, but that is definitely my contention. And now, having been
Mm.
so far removed, selling the agency 5 years ago and being a conscious leadership coach, it's very clear to me. But it's taken me, I'm 41 years old. It's taken me, all this time to figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the process of life. I'm 42, 43 later this year. So similar sort of
Yeah.
time. I mean, I started my agency in 2002 and kind of exited 2016. So probably on a
Oh,
similar kind
we're
of tilt,
we're living the same life.
like the same person
I just
in
have to get a
different
better
cities.
mustache.
Yeah. You'll get there. Just give it time. You got the left sleeve tattoo as well. We could be twins, Kelly. We could be
Really, you
twins.
should have worn a short sleeve shirt today.
Yeah. Well, it was 3 degrees here this morning,
Oh,
so
geez.
probably time to it. That's Celsius, but it's still about what 20 degrees Fahrenheit or something. It was pretty chilly, so it's definitely hoodie weather. But yeah, I think that's a really love that distinction that you're making there. That idea that we can get sort of through your journey, so you've got so wrapped up, you lose yourself somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
And it's often not until we have these kind of inflection points or life shows up somehow and sort of redirects us that we start asking questions.
Right.
And I think that, again, particularly in this industry, whether it's something about this industry or something about the type of person attracted to this creative industry, that there can be a tendency not to kind of recognize that softer, more emotional, sort of elemental aspect of who we are and who I am, and understanding that there is a cause and effect between who I am and how I show up and how I feel. And as you said, those past traumas and all of that stuff, business is an amazing way to bring all of that shit out.
Right.
I often say there's no greater personal development process than starting a business, because all of your stuff will come out somewhere along the line.
Absolutely.
I think it's important to understand that that's going to happen. I think when we start to self-sabotage and have negative mindset and this stuff eventually starts to come out, having someone like yourself that can step in and help you work through that and understand where that's coming from, I think is something, as you say, is often unspoken, particularly sort of in the agency world.
Yeah. Oh my God, I have so many things to say to this. So part of it is fear of success as much as it is fear of failure, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you talk about with self-sabotage, right? Like once we're a year into our business, to our agencies, and we're like doing pretty well, all of a sudden it's like, wait, something's going to happen and the other shoe is going to drop. And now I'm afraid of being too successful. And what does that mean? And what's going to happen? More money, more problems kind of mindset, right? The other thing is that you just made me think of was one of the clearest examples of how our past, our childhood, our wounding, trauma, whatever words you want to use. None of us had a perfect childhood, right? None of us escaped those 0 to 7 or 0 to 12 years unscathed. Nobody had perfect parents or got every need they met according to Maslow's hierarchy. So, we all developed attachment styles, right? And some of us could be a little bit more secure. Some of us could be a little bit more anxious, a little bit more avoidant. Where that shows up in business, though, and this is fascinating to me, I talk about this a lot, and I've written some blog posts and things like that on it. Where that shows up in business is in business development. It's in sales, right? So if I'm a little bit more anxious as an attachment style because of certain conditions in my childhood, then I've grown up and gone through life being a little bit more needy and this is not a judgment, I'm just saying this is a quality. It's an aspect, a characteristic, a little bit more leaning in, a little bit more maybe even desperate, right? So where this shows up in the sales process while you're trying to develop new business at your agency is you might put a proposal together, and on the other end, the prospect might say, "Ooh, I wasn't really, that price point wasn't really what I was expecting," because you didn't do a good job during the discovery process. But all of a sudden you're like, well, maybe we can shave a few $1,000s off of that. Like you're leaning in so much where you're actually willing to give up money just to get the client, as opposed to a more secure attachment style, which would be, okay, well, if that price point isn't working for you, then, or your budget allocation was different, I should say, then let's look at the scope and determine where we can reduce scope, because obviously we're not just going to discount for no reason. I don't need the business. There's plenty of business out there. If I really want to work with you and I can meet you at your allocated budget with the reduction of scope, well, then yes, it might still be a good fit for us to work together. But I'm also super secure that I don't need the business and I can walk away from this. An anxious attachment style would never be comfortable with that. They'll bend and twist and contort just to get the client in, even if it's an ill-fitting client. And that's where you run into huge issues, because then you're running an agency with all of these clients where you are the one allowing for this bad behavior, discounting for no reason, underselling your services. Again, what does that go back to? Your value and your worth as a person. So to me, this is a very clear correlation between the worth and value, self-worth and self-valuation of an agency leader or owner, and how successful, how predictably, sustainably successful the agency is. So this is my work.
Yeah,
I love it. I love it because it's like, man, why have we not been talking about this for the last 20 years?
Yeah. It's fascinating. I mean, this is the space that I love to operate in as well. Is that how does this woo feel good emotional stuff actually translate to this is why your business is not working?
Right.
And exactly what you're saying, that the next part of that can show up in fulfillment as well, right? And delivery of, now if I have that type of attachment, now I'm over delivering, I'm over servicing, I'm people pleasing, and now my business is an absolute nightmare, because not only am I charging a few grand less, so my margins are tight, because of that I don't really want to do the work anymore, maybe because I'm like, oh, this client sucks, this client's a nightmare, they haven't paid me what I wanted. Exactly right. But this can be the thinking, right? It's the client's fault. About on a webinar recently that when this sort of stuff starts to happen, this is why we get these nightmare clients, when we don't have these boundaries, when we aren't clear and have clear, this is where I start, this is where I stop, this is how we're going to service you, this is our process.
I was just on a client call talking about this morning. Yeah.
So I mean, we create those nightmare clients, right, by not having fixed hard boundaries and saying, this is how we operate, this is when you will get to speak to me, this is when I reply to emails, this is the process. I think for me, it's because if we don't have those boundaries, the client's like, I don't know that this guy's confident enough to deliver. I don't have faith. I don't have trust that they know what they're doing. So you know what? I'm going to step in and I'm going to manage it. And that's where micromanagement and all this nightmare stuff starts to show up.
I love that you use the word boundaries, because boundaries are basically how could you say it? It's an indication to those clients, right? That you are confident, that you do value yourself, that you're very clear, you are setting expectations right up front, right? So there's no question. If you want to work with me, these are the parameters, these are the boundaries. And you don't have to say it in such a way where it comes across like so rigid or like non-approachable, right? It could just be very matter of fact, very compassionate, very conversational, right? And I think that's where a lot of people get hung up, because they're kind of like, well, how do I say those things without coming across, like an asshole? And it's like, it's easy to do that, but we have been taught this idea of rigidity and sort of you might call like toxic masculinity, right? This idea that you have to command and control, or present in a certain way that imparts fear or controls or is like authoritative. You don't have to do that. You can have the best of both worlds. You can set healthy boundaries with a smile on your face. And this is when we work. Like you said, this is when we work. This is when we answer emails. If you're going to need something at 3:00 in the morning on a Saturday, we're just not the right firm for you. That's okay. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I absolutely love this conversation. This is like all the things for me.
Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting. And as you were saying earlier, it's for some reason these conversations haven't seemed to have happened broadly particularly in this industry.
We're modeling them right now, Chris.
Yeah.
After this conversation, the whole world is going to start talking.
The whole industry is going to shift. We just shifted the.
Can you feel like the undercurrent right now?
Yeah, the collective consciousness has just shifted and expanded a little bit.
But I mean, I joke, but it is true. I mean, more and more of these conversations are happening. You see it with the idea of the new hallmarks of leadership, right? Vulnerability, empathy, all of these different things. And, we have people like Simon Sinek and Brene Brown and all of those people to thank, because they've started talking about this like 10 years ago, but it's actually finally catching on. And my belief is that it was really the pandemic and Black Lives Matter movement, the murder of George Floyd, all of these things brought all of this emotion and all of this, to the forefront. And, I do think that there's a big shift in collective consciousness, and the amount of people who are now hiring diversity, equity, inclusion, sustainability consultants and coaches and workshop facilitators, it's unprecedented. So yeah, certainly a time where you look at the last 18 months, there certainly has been a massive release of trauma. You sort of look at we call it collective consciousness, global consciousness, that collective trauma of, like you said, BLM and being locked down in your houses and command and control and all of that stuff, isolation. This has kicked off a whole lot of people all around the world sitting and going, who am I? What do I want to do? What does life mean? I mean, in many ways, it's
right?
Yeah, in many ways, I was going to say it's a gift, and I don't say that lightly. I know that there are a lot of people who have been impacted very, very negatively. Some people have lost their lives, and obviously we honor that. And for the people who are still here, it has been a huge wake-up call. And, obviously it wasn't for nothing.
Yeah, there's certainly been some positive shift. And I mean, the agency world, I'd say the bulk of the agency owners that I speak to have capitalized on it, right? The people that have been able to adapt and adjust and being agile and shift up their pricing models to help to really genuinely support their clients and help local businesses, or shift so they've got subscription prices, or they've got some sort of pricing model to help out. And they've then picked, as the economy's come back and those clients have picked up, they've maintained those relationships, seen much more focus on genuine human connection and understanding, and less churn and burn, and more let's work with you as a human, and be much more focused on building genuine relationships. So I think all of that hotbed of the last sort of 18 months has sort of created this sort of a definite positive uptick within our industry, for sure. Yeah,
and others too. Across the board, it's like we are starting to view each other as humans first, and then colleagues, employees, partners. I hate the V word. Partners, strategic partners, associates, family members, spouses, but human number one. And so, the relationships are absolutely everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know you operate a lot in this consciousness space, and you have a whole other business aside from your coaching business.
I do.
Take us through Consciousness Leaders.
Yeah, thanks for asking about it. So Consciousness Leaders is a platform that I launched about 4 months ago now. And it is, it's a collective of all different types of conscious leadership experts. So they could be authors, speakers, coaches, consultants, or workshop facilitators, or one of all of those things. And they're hand selected from around the world, invitation only, vetted. The real problem that we were trying to solve was the fact that there are, like I said before, so many people who are now going to Google to try to find a diversity, equity, inclusion consultant or a sustainability consultant or an anti-racism training workshop facilitator, right? What's happening is that the corporate HR folks, or even event planners, to be honest, are going to Google, and we love Google, but Google doesn't vet that kind of information. So you could have taken a diversity training 6 years ago and be out of work and hang your virtual shingle on a Google ad and say you're a DEI consultant. And there's a big problem with that because it can do a lot more harm than good. And so my idea was, if there are either Google ads or traditional speakers bureaus, which don't really solve this need at all, there's got to be something for, to meet this need. And there was nothing out there. So being the entrepreneurial spirit that I am, I was like, okay, I'll build it. And so consciousnessleaders.com is the result of that. And it's something that I'm extremely proud of. And obviously you see the correlation between me as a conscious leadership coach and now offering this platform in the world. And it's growing. We've got 50 people on the platform today. I'll probably max that out somewhere between 500 and 1,000 collective members.
Yeah, wow.
And I'm here for the long haul with it. It's really important to me to support the people who are doing this really important work in the world. So all of the folks that are in this collective are able to go into organizations and help them, whether that means doing executive leadership coaching, doing sustainability consulting, looking at the life cycle of, the products that they're using. How does that impact climate change and, carbon footprint and all of that? Doing, again, I said, diversity, equity, and inclusion work. All of these things are not short-term 45-minute talks or workshops. These are long-term commitments that organizations are now expected to make. And so if you're going to need those things in your organization, you would want to go to a place like this that has those vetted resources.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction to make there. That space, that stuff has been a 25-minute online video fix for a long time, and we're hopefully now shifting from a lot of talk into the decade of action, right? And SDGs and aligning to 2030 plans. And
I would say it as like, and no longer is it box checking. It's actually committing to investing and engaging with, with this content, and not doing what the Coinbases and the Basecamps of the world did, which was to kind of bow out of uncomfortable conversations. But organizations that are finding real success are the ones leaning into these conversations and supporting their people. Back to the human conversation we've been having for the last, 25 minutes.
Yeah. And I guess fortunately there's much more, there's literally governance around this stuff now. So they have to, organizations are having to go, okay, what is this stuff? How can I run better? How can we be more circular? How can we be more sustainable? How can we be more diverse in our culture, and all these types of things? There's at least these conversations are starting to happen, and we're moving from conversation to action. Like, what are we actually doing about it?
Right.
Do you care enough to actually take some action on this stuff?
Yeah. And also, to be honest, like confronting our own biases, right? I mean, it's a really, really important conversation for everyone's collective self-awareness, to be like, what was my role? What is my role in, unconscious bias? What does that mean? What is conscious inclusion? Like, what are all of these things that people are talking about, and not shying away from words like, anti-racism or white privilege, or, these things can be triggering for people. But the more that we talk about them, the more comfortable we become. We understand that everyone plays a part, and, it's on all of us, as business owners, as employees, as colleagues, as friends, as humans, to make a commitment and to take action every single day to create a better world. And this isn't like kumbaya, right? This is how the world should be. We've gotten really, really far away from that. And Yeah. So anyway, that's my 10 seconds of soapbox time.
No, I love it. Beautiful way to end. And yeah, let's accelerate the consciousness. The more conscious we can be within our businesses, and we can use business as an amazing mechanism to actually get this stuff done, because businesses have resources, right? We have the human capital, we have the resources, we have finance. You can run initiatives, you can do good stuff in the world. And these conversations are happening more and more, and that's important for businesses just to understand that this stuff is top of mind now, right? People want to have conversations in this space. So to have that awareness and be willing, like I said, to hold space, to become more conscious about this, and sort of start to figure out, how do I start to implement this and include this in what we're. Amazing, Kelly. If people want to find out more about you, a few places up on screen, but where's the best place for people to come and get connected with you and find out more about what you do?
Yeah, so for conscious leadership coaching, that would be klcampbell.com. That's my website for that. Obviously, connect with me on LinkedIn. I am not one of those people who ignores all of those connections, so please do that. Actually, my phone number is also an email address is right on my website, so pretty transparent. And then if you'd like to learn a little bit more about consciousness leaders for your organization, consciousnessleaders.com is the place to find that.
Amazing. Well, as I was saying, could probably wrap for another 3 or 4 hours, but we'll keep it nice and tight so that people can get on days with the conversation. I'm glad we got to have it. I know we booked this in, seems like years ago. It was many, many months ago. So I'm glad we finally got to connect and have this conversation. Really important, and very, very insightful for the people out there listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you having me on. And I had no idea how much synergy we had. So you're going to have to come on my show next. Happy
to. We'll continue the conversation. Very, very synergistic. And I love the conversation. And I'm sure the folks listening at home will get a lot out of this as well, and understand how they can start to look into themselves to propel their businesses and their lives forward.
Great. Thanks, Chris.
Amazing. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks, Kelly, for being here. And we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.